Hey guys, what's up? Unrested back again. If you're new here, I'm Unrested, a man who lives in Japan and America. I've lived in Japan for 15 years, and that's my insight into Japan. If you like hearing stuff about Japan, maybe you'll like this channel because I talk about a little bit of everything from politics to news to crime to manga, anime, movies, entertainment news, anything. So, welcome. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers recently. Thank you for joining. Let's jump into the topic for today. Manga versus comics. Now, I've covered this before on my other channel, Inksmith, and it was one of the first videos I put on that channel, and I did not do good research. It was bad research. No, actually, it's not that there was bad research, just that I didn't really go into numbers or give sources. I just said recently I've heard that manga is really outselling comics, which it's true. So let's get into the actual numbers and sources that tell us that that is true. This is coming from Oricon. Manga has outsold comics in the West and accounts for almost 55% of all comic book sales in 2023 alone. In 2020, Demon Slayer sold 100 million units as compared to all other American comic book titles put together, which only sold 15 million units. So, ooh. Oh, and the sources for that one are Otaku USA and Anime News Network. Okay, gotta give my sources. Not just pulling the numbers out of my head. That's why I'm looking down and reading. So you can see those are kind of a little bit of evidence for how badly comics are being beaten to the ground by manga. I'm sure a lot of you already know a lot of reasons and already agree with a lot of the reasons, but let's go into kind of a dissection of why this is happening and maybe what comics could do if they ever wanted to make a turnaround, but I don't really foresee that ever happening. I feel like comics are kind of stuck in their ways and maybe will never change until they finally go extinct. Number one, price and availability. I have written a list here. So, comics, usually 16 to 24 pages. Manga, 60 to 180 pages. Even if you double the size of a comic, it doesn't reach some of the thinnest manga out there. That is sad. That's sad. That's real sad. $3.99 to $4.99 for a one floppy comic that is 16 to 24 pages. $10 to $15 can buy you an entire volume of manga, which is 700 to 1,500 pages, depending on the author. Ooh. Yikes. I think just looking at the difference between a floppy comic, and if you don't know what a floppy is, that's the one that needs to be with the cardboard back and the plastic so that it doesn't like flop over, compared to the book size of a manga, makes it pretty evident how much more is put into mangas. Some people like to argue the point that manga don't have color, which who cares? No one obviously cares, because if color helped, comics would still be outselling manga. Obviously, color isn't really helping comic books too much. Does it make things look a little nicer? Yeah, sure. Does it help the story? No. No, colors don't really help the story. The things that usually help a story are a good story. Places they are sold. That's the next thing I have here. Floppies cannot be displayed. It is difficult for bookstores to have special racks to display floppies. Probably something you don't think about. Comic book stores have those racks that usually turn, or they have those shelves where the comic book has to be like face out and you can see the title, whereas manga, because their book size, can just go with their binding facing out, lined up just like books are, and you can read the title on the side. So it's much easier for, I guess, what, the only bookstore that is left in America, Barnes and Noble, to display them on a bookshelf. Comics can be put into an omnibus, a graphic novel size book, after the series usually finishes or has a whole volume finished. But that's the only time you usually see it sold at a bookstore. I don't think I've ever seen single floppies sold at a Barnes& and Noble. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, in the comments. Next is barrier of entry. A barrier to entering the world of comic books as opposed to entering the world of manga. If you told someone to go read Batman for DC, there's like 5 different Batman series going, so they would be like, "Oh, which which Batman?" If you told them to go read X-Men, and they found out whatever the newest X-Men is out, they sometimes have to know the past era of X-Men to understand the current era of X-Men. Whereas manga, it's really linear. If you tell someone to read a manga and they ask you, which manga do I start reading in this series? You read the one with the number 1 on the side of the book. It's volume 1. Okay, start with volume 1 and then just linearly work your way all the way down through the rest. That's it. If you want to read One Piece, you're going to have quite a lot to read in front of you, but you start with One Piece number 1. It's pretty simple. Same with Naruto. There's a bunch of them out there. There's a bunch of Bleach too, but you just start with Bleach number 1, and it's not hard to find Bleach number 1. It's not hard to find Naruto number 1. It's not hard to find One Piece number 1. You can just go to Amazon, order it right now. It's not a collector's item. You're not going to get a lot of money for owning it. Even in Japan, there's a place called Book Off where you can buy it used for little to no money, probably about half the price. So, what, like $1.50 for 300 pages to read? Insane, right? As opposed to $3.99 for 16 to 24 pages. Ugh. It's hard to know where to start with comic books a lot of time. There's anywhere from 3 to 5 different Spider-Mans going. There's like 3 to 5 different Batmans going. There's old arcs that you might have needed to read. There is crossovers. If you wanted to find out like why Superman and Batman are fighting, you'd also have to know about the fact that the Joker killed Superman's wife, Lois Lane, and that he went megalomaniac after that and wanted to be a tyrannical leader of the world and control all law, while Batman wanted to have a more level-headed, temperate control over the world. So they ended up fighting each other because one thought the other was leading the world in the wrong way. And you'd have to know that these are the archetypes of these characters, and that's why they're in this current conflict. You would have to know a little bit about the villains that were in that comic too, so maybe you'd have to buy a comic about one of the villains, whereas everything's self-contained within manga. Like I said, you pick volume number 1 and you read volume number 1 all the way through the rest, and all the characters that are in that manga are only in that manga. The only time I'd ever say that like there's a spin-off or another series you can read is if that series evolves into another one. For example, Naruto had his son Boruto, but you could start reading Boruto from number 1 and still understand it. You would just have to know that he lives in the same world as Naruto, and maybe Naruto's his father, which you know from even reading volume 1. There isn't a bunch of side characters of Hokage that you need to read about to understand the world of Naruto. Barrier of entry. Start with number 1. Barrier of entry for comics. Sometimes learn about 50 other characters interacting with this universe. The other thing is one author, one artist when it comes to manga. The author and artist who start the series usually write all the way through to the end, and when a series ends, it just ends. That's it. They don't try to reboot it, restart it, have a spin-off. There is what's called doujin manga, which are fan-made versions. Those are usually not sold. They're usually just like released for free online. Or sometimes they're sold on the street in places like Akihabara or Denden Town in Osaka. But those don't really count as anything canon, so you really wouldn't need to learn any about those. And sometimes they get into some like really weird, perverted versions of the character, so maybe you don't want to read those versions. But yeah, once the series ends, it just ends. There's not going to be a reboot of Naruto. He's not going to be rebooted 3 to 5 different times. So, barrier to entry. A lot of different ways that it works well with manga, and it doesn't work so well with comic books. Even within the movies recently, I feel like with comic book, it's like you got to watch like 5 different series on Disney to understand the new Marvel arc within the Marvel Universe. I'm not going to watch all these series. I can barely get through one series that I'm really interested in recently, let alone like five different ones I don't care about the character. Three, wider appeal. One thing I did see quoted in the same article where I read those stats for Oricon, which was kind of. I don't completely agree with this. There's some aspects of this quote I agree with and some that I don't. It said that Western comics in general are more male coded interests like action, crime, horror, and sci fi, which I think they're trying to say like comics are not for women, but I feel like they've been kind of sexist towards women just by saying this, even though I think their idea behind this was completely the opposite, where they wanted to be like they need to appeal better to women. It's like, women can be into horror, sci-fi, action, and crime. I think there's a lot of women out there who are into that, so I don't think these are totally male coded, but I will say these are kind of the narrow path that a lot of Western comics do go down. Although I'd say like horror, there's not a lot of horror Western comics. I mean, aside from like the old Creep Show comics and stuff like that, which are they still published? I haven't seen new versions of them recently. Action, isn't action just superhero? Like, I mean, action is, crime and sci-fi. So I kind of feel like they fall into those same things. Action is superhero, action is crime, action is sci-fi. Also, saying sci-fi is totally male coded or horror is male coded, like I don't agree with that. My wife loves horror. I know plenty of women who love sci-fi. Crime? Is there a lot of crime what is a crime Western comic book? Is Batman considered a crime based Western comic book? I don't get it. But they are very narrow. Most of them are, and let me quote this other one. It's superheroes that appeal to a power fantasy. That is true. I will agree with that. Manga have the same thing. They do have superheroes that appeal to a power fantasy. But that's just one of many, 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 many genres. I would say, in general, when you think of Western comics, you think of a superhero, right? Am I wrong to say this? I myself, now, when I used to really be into Western comics when I was like in high school, I wasn't a big fan of those. I did like things that were like Dark Horse comics. I liked Preacher. I liked Sandman. Those were more my type of thing. Vertigo comics that were kind of like weird, dark, and creepy. I liked those a little bit more. The Invisibles, Watchmen, which I guess even the Watchmen is kind of a superhero comic. So I guess I'm wrong. I can't quote myself. Whereas, okay, let's go into like some of my favorite manga, which these genres are like all over the place. There's Fool's Night, which is kind of like a horror sci-fi where like people are turned into plants because the earth runs out of plant life. Donuts Under a Crescent Moon, it's like a lesbian love story, romance slice of life. Bibliomania, which is kind of like a dark horror spin on Alice in Wonderland. Jagan, which is like the weirdest, I guess maybe superhero story. It's a cop who gets infected with some kind of alien virus that makes him be able to pull this giant biomechanical gun out. How do you describe Jagan? Your Lion Spring, which is about a kid suffering from PTSD and can no longer play his musical instrument because of that. I lost the title to this one. I forgot what it was, but it pretty much translates to Body Retrieval Gang of Eight. And it's about like this group of ragtag nobodies who have to retrieve bodies and find out how they were murdered. Now, see, like that would actually be kind of a crime-based manga. I can't think of a Western comic book equivalent to that. Good Night Poon Poon, really tearjerker of a comic. Emotional, slice of life, depressing. What genre do you put Good Night Poon Poon into? I guess it would be slice of life, right? But it's kind of like a surrealistic slice of life. I highly recommend it. If you want something that will emotionally touch you, check out Goodnight Poon Poon, but be ready to deal with some demons, okay? And that when I say demons, I mean like emotional demons. Yeah, slice of life and romance, sports. There's a whole genre called boys love, which is like gay-based comics and stuff like that. Like, I mean, or gay-based manga, sorry. There's so many different genres. Like, there's everything you could imagine. I mean, there's literally manga about tennis and golf, wrestling, boxing, um, anything. There's ones that are just completely about food. Another one that was one of my favorite was like Midnight Diner, which it was about like this ex yakuza who became a chef and opened this diner that only opened between midnight and 7 a.m. And he would talk about all the food that he cooked, and the diners who came in had these really eclectic stories. Some were sad, some were happy, some were funny, some were action based. It was a little bit of everything, slice of life, with food based comic inside of it. What a wild series. It was great. It's still running. So as you can see, there's like a huge span. There's like a massive, massive span of genres to read when it comes to manga. Whereas once again, when you get back to Western comic books, it's mostly superhero. I realize there is some indie stuff that's like totally different, but that's few and far between, or almost not heard of whatsoever. Um, Ooh, this next one's a touchy one. Toxicity. Toxicity with the readers. Look, I'm approaching this from what I see online between articles, YouTube, and fans of these comics. Okay, I'm not taking a side here. Um, there is toxicity between fans, where there's fans who, you know, I guess, stand their different heroes, who say who's better against who, which I don't really see that happen too much in manga. Sometimes they like to consider it, and they even do their old dojin, as I said before, fan made comics that have them fight against each other. But for the most part, you don't hear people saying like, well, One Punch Man versus Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z sucks because One Punch Man can kill anybody with one punch. You don't hear about like Attack on Titan characters being pitted against Demon Slayer like that. People just be like, well, one's in Germany, like like why would they be fighting? Like it doesn't make any sense. They're not even in like the same timeline or universe. Whereas there's like people who stand comics and get actually like toxic with saying about if they could fight or kill each other or whatever, which is just weird. You're dealing with fantasy heroes. Like don't get that invested to the point that you lose friendships over a fake hero. And then oh god, this is a touchy one. And then there's the writers, which I put another subject down here later about how sometimes writers take over a famous character and they change so much about it that it's no longer the type of character it was before, or what it represents is no longer the same thing. We'll get into that later, but one thing I want to say that Shonen Jump, like one of the biggest producers of manga in Japan, does is they run these like small, couple pages in their giant omnibus, giant book, giant newspaper quality book that they put out, and then they let their readers vote on what small segment or story should get its own series. And I feel like that's the smartest thing they could do. They sell the book for like super cheap. It's like $3.99 for this like Bible size manga full of all these stories. And then voters write in or email in about which story they enjoyed the most, and whatever one they get the most votes for is given the money and the time to make a whole series about it. That's how Bleach started, that's how Naruto started, how a lot of very famous manga started. Viewer feedback. Imagine that. Viewer feedback, reader feedback, whatever you want to call it, okay? But I guess you are viewing, right? It's manga, it's a visual art. And then they make the series. Like, what a simplistic and obvious way to go about figuring out which series to fund. And I think like comic books could definitely stand to use some of those same specifications. Like, why don't they just put out like a giant newspaper quality book of small stories or small hero stories or whatever type of stories, and see which ones get voted on by the people who buy these giant, newspaper quality Bible sized books. I think about how far that could take them in the whole being able to market things to fans. Um, Number five, DC and Marvel have listened to safety of marketing and have begun to act like Hollywood. These next two things I'm going to talk about were really brought to my attention by a YouTuber named Negative Legend. So I want to give him a shout out. And he is 100% right about that. This is very true. DC and Marvel are not really tackling anything with their comics that is outside of being very financially safe to them. Hence, you see things like 5 different versions of Batman being sold. Well, Batman sold in the past. Let's just keep selling Batman. Let's not take a chance on a new hero. Well, Spider Man did great in the past. Let's sell 30 different versions of Spider Man. Okay, you can do that, but good luck trying to find like new readers or new people to get invested. Same thing Hollywood's doing now. Just the same reboots, the same boring ideas. I mean, to the point that like I go out of my way to look for foreign films now. I watch a lot of like Asian films just because at least they're trying new stuff. It seems like the more poor Asian countries out there, like the ones with a lower GDP, like Vietnam or the Philippines, they're coming out with way better horror movies than anything Hollywood's put out in ages. Like it's just garbage. Insidious Part 300. Like the newest Insidious was so bad. Red Door. What a bad movie. Oh my god. But like, I forget what the name of the. I recently watched a Philippines movie where it was just. Oh, it was called Deleter. That's what it was. It was so good. It was like a really decent horror movie. And you don't think of the Philippines as like the forefront of high budget horror movies. You don't need a high budget. You just need a good story. Same thing is true for comics and manga. You just need a good story. Okay, and number 6, and this is another thing I also took from Negative Legend, and this is kind of a really touchy one too. And what I talked about with toxicity, and this is writer to fan toxicity, not fan to fan toxicity. Number 6, politics suck. Okay, there is politics in manga, but usually it's something that's kind of pushed to the background. If there's a statement that's made, it's low key in the background. For example, Attack on Titan. It's obviously a stand against fascism, tyranny, iron fisted rulers, rules that are never fully explained to the public, or a history that's never fully explained to the public, or information hidden so that they live in fear and obey whatever the fascist tyrannical leader wants them to do. It's obviously that's the message, but they don't beat you over the head with it. If you read the manga, you'll eventually gather that yourself because you're not a complete idiot, right? Whereas I don't know what is going on with Marvel and DC. I mean, there's literally comics that come out where there was like one where a dolphin dies at a beach because there's a plastic bag over its face, so they go to the Quickie Mart where those bags are used and they kill the person working behind the counter. It's like, that's your political message? And this was the X-Men doing that. That's not a villain. It sounds like something a villain would do. This is the eco-friendly / gay X-Men arc, which what what I don't know why they decided to do this. It's also another thing Negative Legend says is the recent DC and Marvel comics make a big show of characters suddenly being LGBTQ plus in reboots, but making it a big deal makes it less normalized. I'm totally for comics or manga about gay characters. It's fine. One of my favorite ones, Donuts Under a Crescent Moon, is a lesbian love saga. All right? It's a great story. But that's background noise. You're just more following the story. They don't announce that they are lesbian through every comic and make a big show about it, because to normalize it is to make it an everyday thing, not this character is now rebooted as gay. If you suddenly took Naruto and rebooted Naruto as a gay character, people would be very confused, because that's not what Naruto is about. It's about martial arts. It's about people believing in themselves to learn skills that are very difficult to learn, about fighting the enemies in their life, confronting their own personal demons and stuff like that. Whereas, okay, I wrote down a list here of characters that have suddenly been rebooted as gay, and I was actually kind of shocked at how many times this has been done, where Iceman and Hercules are the most recently one. Like, they're a new gay couple in these comics. Aquaman has had a reboot as gay. Superman's son was gay. Harlequin was rebooted as gay. There was an X-Men gay eco-friendly group, and Robin was rebooted as gay. Like, that's never been part of their story. Like, that's never been their arc. When Japan wants to do gay, guess what they have? An entire genre around it called boys love or girls love, where that's what you know you're getting when you buy the comic. And not only that, it normalizes it in a way where it follows the personal life of these people working in business, these people working in sports, these people working in entertainment. And oh yeah, they happen to be gay. We already know that because we bought the genre. But it follows their normal everyday life and their normal everyday things. It doesn't make gay a form of entertainment for you. It doesn't make that a neon shining sign that says this is all this character is. It normalizes it. Whereas a lot of DC and Marvel comics that try to do this make it the main focus of the reboot. And like I said, they use reboots to do this, which I think is like a really bad idea. Like, if you want to make that an aspect, if a friend told you in real life or came out of the closet and told you they were gay, lesbian, trans, bi, whatever, you don't celebrate a whole week of it. You say, okay, thanks for telling me, and then you move on. That's it. That's all you do. Life continues. You don't shout it out to the world. You don't let other people know who don't want to know. You don't expose their secret to anybody else if it's a secret for them still, if they're still in the closet. You learn about them, you understand, and you move on to normalize it, to make their life more normal, to allow them to be more accepted, to understand LGBTQ plus better. So I don't understand why these comics do it in an almost antagonistic way by taking beloved characters and suddenly changing their whole story arc to be around LGBTQ plus concepts. There's nothing wrong with that. Having a manga or a comic surrounded completely around that from the start, that's okay. But there's a genre for that in manga that makes it so much easy for them to deliver the message and normalizes it in a way where it shows LGBTQ plus characters. Well, I'm losing. In a normal everyday life circumstances. Like, you get what I'm trying to say here, right? Like, I hope everybody understands what I'm trying to say. It's just like, why would you do that? Why would you do this in such an antagonistic way? If anything, it like brings more heat, more anger, more, I don't know, hate towards a people who've already had to deal with hate for so long. Why would you do this? Why would you do it in such a way? Come out with your own genre. Just like you have a genre for hero fantasies. Come out with a genre for gay fantasies. It's okay. Japan shows us it's okay. Like, just do it. It's okay. Try more genres. So, last but not least, let's try to end on a somewhat positive note. How could comics make a comeback? What could they do? And from all the research I looked into, from the different videos I watched, there's a pretty simple answer, actually. Advertising. The way comics are advertised. They're not. They're just not. They're not advertised. If you want to learn about comics, if you want to learn about comic storylines, timelines, plots, etc., you usually have to go to a comic-based YouTuber. Or maybe if you went to a website about it, which, I mean, even e-zines about comics are kind of dying out. Like Comic Historian, whose channel is also suffering because not many people are into comics anymore. That's how you learn about comics. But what if comic book publishers did ads on YouTubers' channels who talk about entertainment? So, for example, a channel that talks about manga, a channel that talks about movies, a channel that talks about superhero movies, a channel that talks about video games. What if they did paid ads on those? The days of doing ads inside of a comic book shop make no sense. Like, comic book shops are dying too. And advertising inside of a comic book shop is like, I don't know, you want to promote your band, but you only put up like band posters inside the club that people are already going to see the band. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, yeah, that I'm here because of that posters. I'm here for this band, and that poster's already here telling me to see this band that I'm already here to see. Like, why are you advertising to me? It doesn't make any sense. Go to places where it's kind of tangential or related, or maybe networking that works really well. Is advertise paid ads on YouTubers who are in entertainment based YouTube channels. I don't care what medium it is. I don't care what genre it is. I'm not saying I need those ads. I've gotten over the fact that my YouTube channel is pretty much a dead channel that doesn't make money anymore. It never really did, actually. I never really had this channel for money. It was never at a point where it made money. But there are channels out there that exist to make money, and when they do, they would love to probably have you sponsor an ad on their channel. And guess what? They have way more viewers than most TV shows these days, than even most movies these days. I mean, you could probably hit up a YouTuber, put an ad for a comic book on there, and do better than if you put that same ad in the newest Marvel movie that came out. Or maybe even the newest, what was it, Madam Web was like the newest Sony Marvel movie that came out. Like, did anybody go see that? Like, if you advertised comics on that, you would probably do worse than if you advertised it on, I don't know, Anime Man. Imagine letting Joey advertise your comic book. You'd probably get a big chunk of readers if even 1% of his viewers went to go buy your comic. Use YouTubers as your ad space. Like, well, it's such a simple idea. I don't know why comic books don't do that. Why Western comic books don't do that. I don't know. That's my last little bit of advice for dying Western comic books. Although, really, I don't see how they could ever make a comeback. But that's it. That's my take on it. I hope you enjoyed the video. I did do a little bit of research. I did write all these ideas down. I was a good boy. And if you think I was a good boy, could you subscribe? Could you hit the like button? One thing I do have now, after just talking about money, I have memberships on my channel. I made them as low as they could possibly go, which was like $1. My channel is still based in Japan, so it was 190 was the lowest I could go. It was, 190 yen was the lowest I could go, which I think comes close to $1, or is like around $1. So forgive me if one day the exchange rate totally shoots up when you finally watch this video and you're like, that is not $1, Scott. Sorry. I made it back when the exchange rate was really crap. I think it's like 180 to the dollar. So I'm pretty close with going with the lowest of 190 as far as yen. I think there's a higher one too. You can go up to like $5 if you want to, but like even $1 membership, wow. For that you get to get some like special emotes and stuff, special stickers. You get priority response. You show up first on top of everybody else's comment. And I have a Discord server, but I think I'm going to start a private one where I can talk to the fans that have been here for like a super long time, or members who join. And I'll get that all figured out later. I'm not going to talk about it in this video where it's not even built yet. Get with it, Unrested. Come on. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to try and end it again. If you like it, subscribe or hit the like button. And I will talk to you next time. Have a great rest of your day.